You're here with Chris Yang from APCC, Asian Pacific Cultural Center. I'm a youth coordinator and I work within the Tacoma School District.
My name is Mele Havea. I currently work for World Flight Services and United Airlines.
This event is important for many reasons. We have different workshops that cater to different needs. We've had our workshop for suicide prevention, for mental health awareness. This is indeed Mental Health Awareness Month as well as AANHPI, but there's a stigma within our PI community and we would like to destigmatize that. My personal experience, I would say it's hectic, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful mess. This is my first time emceeing. I usually don't do these, but being able and given the opportunity to MC for this event, it means a lot to me. It means a lot because we're able to spread the word and information that we need to our people. And not only that, we can represent our not so well represented Pacific Islanders.
This event is important because we need to have conversations in our community about topics that are taboo, just so we can open up doors to our future generations. My experience today, I can honestly say, was very overwhelming. Being on the port planning team and being one of the leadership members, it was just a lot, but seeing everything come together and seeing everybody enjoy themselves and the workshops come to life was very much needed because of all the hard work that we put into it.
Hear the chants of the islands, the chants of the islands is what they say in Africa.
Blessing. It's taught me a lot. I've got to work with a bunch of amazing people, and it's just a blessing to be able to speak to our youth and get them to learn more about everything around this world. When we come to the States from out of states, we don't know too much. We don't know a lot, and so it's really hard for us. We become the working class, and it's just a difficult battle that we probably won't win unless we are educated. So if I could describe today, I would say it's a blessing.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our class today. Inner Wellness 8-part series, part 6. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out what part 6 is. Depression and anxiety, what does it look like in navigating cultural impacts? I just want to give a shout out to that video you just saw. That was from our Oceania 2024 Youth Health Summit, led by the young professionals there who you saw, Chris Yang, Mele Havea, and then we had CBOs tap in. They did an amazing job, again, covering those 4 pillars that they identified, which was mental health, environmental health, career readiness, and cultural appreciation. So big ups to that team. But this is an extension of that. So before I pass it off to Sala and Scarlett, really just want to thank our sponsors who make this conversation possible. So this is sponsored by Shoreline Community College and the WAVES program, worthy of achievement, validation, empowerment, and success for Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. To the Big Oos Foundation, which is a local nonprofit organization committed to building vibrant communities through youth development, arts and culture, music and entertainment, radio, sports, and business. And to the Office of Equity and Community Partnerships at King County Public Health, and to Tacoma Pierce County Public Health APD program. Just thank you so much to those organizations for allowing us to continue to have these important conversations in the Pacific Islander community with the two Pacific Islander experts that I know of and have been working with for the last 3 years. But with that, I pass it over to the amazing Sala and Scarlett.
Thanks, Celia. I always love your passing it off to us. So we really, truly, truly appreciate it. Can't continue to thank our sponsors enough that who continue to entrust Sal and I to have these community conversations with our AA and HPI community, and particularly tonight with our PI community, for sure. Again, just it's a whole team behind that makes this happen, and Sal and I are just so grateful. Even though you only see us, there is literally a whole team behind this, so we can't thank y'all enough. So with that being said, my name is Scarlett Ekaroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach. Been in this field for over a decade, and I currently work through my private practice. Not only do I see my amazing clients there, but I get to do this amazing community work with Sala, and we are continuing to grow in exponential ways that we are truly, truly thankful for. So tonight's conversation, we're going to talk about depression and anxiety. What does it look like, and navigating cultural stigmas around that. Another great conversation that I just love being a part of, because like we get to truly answer questions that folks have about just depression and anxiety and how it truly impacts us culturally as well. The Sala does an amazing job just literally continuing to break it all the way down so that we can receive whatever we have to receive in regards to this information. And it's just amazing. So if you have any questions, if for those who are in the Zoom room and for those who are in the Facebook room, if you have any questions, please, and stories that you would like to share or ask, the only thing that we ask is you please keep it relevant to tonight's discussion. Again, tonight's discussion is on depression and anxiety. What does it look like, and navigating the cultural stigmas around that. So with that being said, I will be co-facilitating, and I'm going to pass it on off to Sala so she can take us on this journey. Off to you, sis.
Thank you, Scarlett. Good evening, everyone, and welcome into tonight's conversation on depression and anxiety. I think probably out of all of our community conversation, I think this one is a lot more informative and pretty straightforward. So really excited to just pass along and share some information about depression and anxiety. But before I do that, my name is Sala Afalava, and I am a licensed mental health therapist. I, just like Scarlett, I also have my own private practice, New Hope Counseling, and I see clients out of there. And then I also see clients through different community partners that we partner with, and then also doing a lot of community conversations around different mental health topic along with Scarlett. So if you're new here to this space, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. And thank you for just taking the time to invest in yourself, because that's what these community conversations are. They are ways that you are investing in yourself, in learning about mental health, and then continuing to normalize seeking mental health services within our communities. Research does show that within our AA and HPI communities, the underutilization of mental health services is prominent. So that means we really don't use it a lot. Like we don't, it's not really an avenue of help that we get into as a community. And I think Scarlett and I's goal with these community conversations is just to kind of change that a little bit and make sure that those barriers, whatever those barriers are removed. And so that way we can connect with you, and you can just hop on a Zoom and send a question about something pertaining to mental health or the topic that we're talking about. And like we always say in our classes, like you wouldn't get this information otherwise, like unless you're sitting across from a licensed mental health professional and you're already paying probably $200-300 a session. And so a lot of the skills that Scarlett and I share throughout our community conversations are life skills. So we hope that you engage with us tonight. If you're tuning in on Zoom, thank you. If you're tuning in on Facebook, welcome. Hopefully you'll be able to get something out of tonight's conversation. But I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Also, please forgive me. I am feeling all of the Washington weather. And so if you hear me go off screen a bit, just a cough, excuse me, but just giving a heads up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a bit.
Awesome. So while Sala gets set up, again, thank you all for being here, because if you could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here. And we truly appreciate that. We enjoy sharing this information with our community. And so again, if you have any questions or if there's anything you would like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. Either raise your hand or mute yourself. If you're on Facebook, don't hesitate to put it in there as well. Again, the only thing that we ask is you keep the stories or comments and questions relevant to tonight's topic. So Sala, you're good to go?
Yep, good to go.
Yep.
All right, so again, our conversation tonight is depression and anxiety. What does that look like, and how can we navigate some of the cultural stigmas around depression and anxiety within our community? So that's going to be tonight's focus. And again, just like with all of our other community conversation, we usually like to just kind of give you a heads up, a little bit of the lay of the land, let you know what's coming up. So tonight, we really truly want to define for you what clinical depression is, because there is a difference that we will get into later. We want to define for you what anxiety is. We want to define for you, what do these things look like? Because you hear it all the time. It's almost like it's become like this trendy thing where, you hear a lot of young people sort of like, oh, I have depression, or I have anxiety, and sometimes it can become like, almost like a household name where people are just kind of like saying it, and then maybe you just continue to pick that up and you continue to say it yourself, but not really sure what exactly it means. So tonight we really want to be able to make sure that we leave with you the information, like accurate information about depression and anxiety. And then also talk a little bit about, well, why do people get depressed and anxious? There's a lot of different reasons why, and hopefully you will be able to share, if you are able to, maybe, some of the reasons or causes as to why you think people get depressed and anxious, or if it's something that you have experienced, then you can share that experience as well if you are open to it. And then we're going to wrap it up with just sharing some information on how then can we navigate a lot of cultural stigmas around depression and anxiety. I think last week we had a conversation on cultural stigmas and how to navigate cultural stigmas. And sometimes these stigmas are strongly associated or embedded within our cultures. And so we want to take some time to be able to maybe just talk through some of the ways that we can navigate those cultural stigmas as they come up, because they're so strongly associated with our cultures, but then specifically for depression and anxiety. That is our agenda for this evening. So depression, what is depression? I think, so before we get into the conversation, I'm just gonna go ahead and share this short clip for a bit. Let me know if the sound works, Scarlett. And then we'll talk about it, okay? We'll have a little discussion about it in a bit here. Scarlett, let me know if okay.
Depression is a disorder that afflicts over 10% of the world's population, but we as a society know little about it. Stereotypes tell us that depressed people are weak, unless they happen to be a tortured artist. It can be difficult to understand depression because it's invisible. It's a disorder defined by thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, rather than obvious symptoms like vomiting, rashes, or fever. Those who have experienced depression are all too familiar with comments from misguided friends such as "snap out of it" or "just get up and do something." Even those with depression might have a hard time understanding what they are experiencing, and they often blame themselves for not being able to snap out of it. To understand what depression really is, we need to talk about symptoms. First of all, depression has symptoms related to how someone feels. These symptoms include nearly constant feelings of sadness, anger, guilt, or hopelessness. Next, There are symptoms related to behavior. They include social withdrawal, a lack of energy, low motivation, poor concentration, sleep problems, or significant changes in appetite. Finally, symptoms related to thoughts include poor self-esteem, thoughts of suicide, and loss of interest in regular activities. Symptoms of depression must last at least 1 week, and they are often cyclical. This means that the symptoms can come and go over a period of months or years. A person who experiences depression once is likely to have future episodes. It can be difficult to think of these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as symptoms. To many of us, because they are in our head, they can seem like decisions. It can seem like someone who is depressed has chosen to be lazy and sleep all day, or they have decided to stop spending time with friends because they have a bad attitude. But remember, what's in our head isn't imaginary. Our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by a complex series of chemicals in our brains. The exact causes of depression are poorly understood, but we have an idea of factors that influence the illness. We know that changes to hormones in the brain, called neurotransmitters, can have a major effect on depression. Many medications used in the treatment of depression work by increasing the levels of these neurotransmitters. We also know that genetics play an important role in depression. People who have a family history of depression are more likely to experience the disorder. Just because your parents had depression doesn't mean you necessarily will, but the chances are greater. Finally, we know that environmental factors play a role in depression. Living in poverty, experiencing a traumatic event, or other stressful situations may trigger the disorder. That being said, depression does not always have a clear trigger, which often leads to a person not understanding why they feel so down. Treatment for depression usually includes psychotherapy and medication. Either can work on its own, but a combination of both medication and therapy has been found to be the most effective. In summary, depression is a disorder that's widespread but poorly understood. The symptoms can negatively affect a person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior to a debilitating degree. However, treatments that include medication, psychotherapy, or a combination of the two can help to manage to eliminate the symptoms of depression.
So, I think probably one of my biggest takeaway from this short clip about depression, I think it does a really, really good job of being able to let people know that having a major depressive disorder, really the symptoms show up in how you feel, in behavior, and then in thoughts. So it's feelings, thoughts, and behavior. Because a lot of the times, like I was saying in the video, I think sometimes people see like maybe the behavior, like, oh, this person has just been sitting in their room, not doing anything, and then here comes the stigmas that's associated with that, like, oh, you're just lazy, or, because you just don't have the motivation, you don't have the drive to get up and do things. So I think like really one of the biggest takeaways from this video for me is always that it does a really good job in hopefully sharing with everyone that's tuning in that when it comes to depression, the symptoms of it shows itself through how you feel, through behavior symptoms like low motivation, things like that. And then your thoughts. How are you thinking about things? Are you going from one negative thought to another negative thought? Are your thoughts about ending your life? So those are all of the things, because I think not a lot of people really are able to like understand that or grasp it. Like they just see maybe one thing, like, oh, they just feel sad. It's like feeling sad is just one of the way that people are exhibiting symptoms of depression. But on top of that, it also can come through like, well, what are they thinking about? What is taking up 90% of their thoughts, of their thought processes? Okay. So just want to put it out there. If anyone want to share anything that like maybe stood out to them from this particular video.
The thing that came across that this is kind of speaking to our younger crowd is like, it's not as fun as these TikTok videos.
Okay.
But
Mhm.
it is the appropriate information that you need. And so that's one of the things that Sal and I that we love social media. It does a good job of bringing awareness. Sometimes the facts are not right. What we've
Mhm.
seen across. So it's just like it's videos like this that help literally break it all the way down to where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. So, and I think the biggest thing that I heard this time from the video was just like how these symptoms can be on a cycle,
Oh,
because
yes. Hmm.
that's what it was. We were
Cyclical.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah, it's cyclical
Mhm.
in that it could happen for a moment and then be gone for a moment,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so that's why it says, and Sala will break it down more as we continue to like
Mhm.
the impact of how long the symptoms last will determine, you know,
Yeah.
um, these diagnoses.
Mhm. For sure. Thanks for sharing that, Scarlett. Anything else? If not, okay. All right. So clinical depression. So there's this book. I should have had my book up here. It's somewhere behind me, probably. But there's this book. It's called the DSM, Diagnostical Statistical Manual. There you go, Scarlett. That's the book right there. That's within arm's reach of every therapist. But this is pretty much, the book where it has all of the mental health disorders, the clinically diagnosable mental health disorders, right? And so in every disorder, there's certain criterias that needs to be met. Diagnostic criterias is what we call them. And so when it comes to clinical depression, what you see up here on this slide, these are, and it's not in this order, just don't mind the arrows. What you see up here are all of the different symptoms, and my mouse is tracing it. So these are all the different symptoms, or not symptoms, sorry, the diagnostic disorder. Oh my gosh, my brain is like kind of
Criteria.
criterias. That's the word I'm looking for. Goodness gracious. So in order to receive a diagnosis of clinical depression, these symptoms must be able to cause a person, an individual, clinically significant distress, not only in like maybe their home environment, but it could be in their work environment, or it could be really, really affecting them in functioning in different areas of their lives. Okay. And I usually like to slow it down on this slide right here because it is truly a lot of information. But like we said in the beginning, Scarlett and I really just want to make sure that we give you, because you hear depression on TikTok, you hear anxiety on TikTok, you hear all of these things, and it's almost like it's becoming such a trendy thing. But we want to make sure we let our community members know, from the professionals in the field, exactly what it is. So let's go through some of these criterias. Depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. So that means I'm feeling depressed for 2 hours out of the whole 24 hours. So it says depressed mood most of the day. So that means probably more than 12 hours a day, nearly every day. Then you have diminished interest or pleasure in doing things. That means things that you usually are interested in and want to do, and you find pleasure in them. You don't even have pleasure in doing any of those things anymore. And this is, again, most of the day, nearly every day. Now, there are times where I don't find interest in doing things that I, normally enjoy doing. But does that mean that I fit this criteria? Probably not, because I'll probably feel that way for like maybe 2-3 hours. So you can feel all of these different criterias probably for like 2-3 hours or so, but then you're fine afterwards. I think like the key takeaway that you'll see that's being repeated throughout all of these criterias is the frequency. Most of the day, nearly every day. Like those are the key things that we as therapists, that we as clinicians look for whenever people come into therapy. And if we're looking for depression, these are some of the things that we're looking for. Like, how often are they feeling this way? How long is it lasting? Another criteria, significant weight loss when not dieting, or like if you're not trying to diet, you're not trying to gain weight, but you're losing weight, or for some people, it is putting on weight. It is putting on weight. So it's like, like, oh, I usually don't, put on weight super fast, but this time around, I'm finding I'm just like eating anything and everything. That could be a way that you're trying to cope with something. So you're gaining weight quite significantly. So there's an increase or decrease in appetite that we could be looking for. And again, this is nearly every day. Okay, so that's a key point there. Also, another criteria that falls under to be able to diagnose someone with clinical depression is slowing down of thoughts, or reduction of physical movements observed that is often like other people are noticing, is pretty much what that is. So that means slowing down a thought could be like, maybe your response time is a bit slower than usual. Your response time to something. So there's a delayed response time. Another one could be, like, example of that criteria could be maybe you're speaking in a monotone voice when usually you don't speak that way, but you're just kind of like, oh, everything is fine. Like, think about Eeyore. I always think about Eeyore when I think depression. Or just his demeanor of just, oh, woe is me, I'm here again. So I always think Eeyore. That always helped me to kind of remember it. But you're speaking in a monotone voice. Also could be like an increased of forgetfulness. So that means like you're just like nothing is like, it just, things are not sticking to you. That memory is just like not there right now, just because I don't feel like I'm here. Right. So that's what that could look like. Then you also have fatigue or loss of energy almost nearly every day. So again, like this criteria is pretty self-explanatory. You don't have the energy, even though like you slept for 24 hours and you wake up, but you still feel like you're tired. So you're going back to sleep. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, nearly every day. And this could be inappropriate guilt looks like maybe guilt over a situation that's maybe not even your fault or not even in your control, but you just have a significant amount of guilt over that. So you just feel, worthless about it, and just you feel this way nearly every day. Another criteria that we look for in people is diminished ability to think or concentrate. So just not being able to make any decision, just not being able to focus. You find yourself just not being able to focus. And then, of course, like recurrent thoughts of death or suicidal ideation. Sometimes with a plan, sometimes you have you don't have a plan, but you just keep having those recurrent thoughts. So I know this is like a whole lot of information, and I want to slow it down a bit. Again, I want to reiterate that the key here for whenever someone comes into our office and they maybe they're like, I've been feeling down, and things like that. And so whenever they say things like that, we try to assess, well, maybe it's a mood thing. So let's assess for depression. These are the symptoms. These are the criterias that therapists are looking for to be able to, diagnose someone with clinical depression. Now, here's the thing, because one thing before I move on to that point, in order for us to be able to diagnose someone with clinical depression, at least 5 or more of these symptoms, you have to be experiencing it within, within the 2-week period. I know the video said 1 week, but it's the DSM, the book that Scarlett showed, it's 2 weeks. So that means you have to experience at least 5 of these, 5 or more of these different criterias for at least 2 weeks or more, in order for a therapist to be able to say, yeah, you have clinical depression. Okay. So I know that's still a lot of information. I'm going to add one more. And so there is a difference between feeling depressed and being diagnosed with clinical depression. We want to make sure that we share that with our community, because sometimes, like I said, we see that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and sometimes people are, when they feel depressed, they automatically think that like, oh, I'm clinically depressed. Like, no, you're not clinically depressed unless a therapist diagnosed you with clinical depression. And in order for a therapist to diagnose someone with clinical depression, they have to meet at least 5 of these criterias, and they had to have been experiencing it for 2 weeks or more. Now you can feel depressed, I can, feel depressed, anytime. Like, feeling depressed just means you feel sad. That's just another word for it. You can feel sad does not mean you are clinically depressed. And I think that's a really important point to be able to share with our community or whoever's tuning in, so that they can understand that's like, okay, like it's okay to feel depressed. We all feel depressed sometimes. But there's a difference between feeling depressed and being diagnosed with clinical depression. There's a significant difference. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there for a bit and see if anyone have any questions or comments, or Scarlett, if you wanted to add anything to this slide.
Just to summarize what you said, so in order to be diagnosed with clinical depression, again, it's symptoms, the length of how long you've had the symptoms, and has it impacted your daily functioning? And so, because oftentimes, especially with I would say our teens that we've seen, they've been like, I'm depressed, and I'm like, well, let's talk about it. And so it's like what Sala was saying. So a lot of times when I've talked with teens before, we talked about they're having a moments of depression rather than being clinically depressed, because they were sad about something when when it didn't go their way. But we know if it went their way, they would feel a lot better.
Yeah, it would have changed. Yeah.
But for clinical depression, even if it goes your way, it doesn't change. Like how you feel doesn't change. You still feel all of these things that Sala mentioned. So that's the big difference between clinical depression and feeling depressed. If it doesn't change how you feel, even though it's gone your way, those are the indicators that we are looking for when we're doing when somebody says, and then we have assessments too that can help. And then of course there's a dialogue that we have in that, because even in the video, what I love that it talked about was the like sometimes with people who have clinical depression, about the biochemistry, but like how sometimes it can be passed down, but that's not for you all to figure out. Like, let us help you figure it out. Let's team up together, not again, love social media, love TikTok, all that, but please to talk to somebody, a professional who is aware of all of this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And often just to tag on to what Scarlett added too, with clinical depression, oftentimes like if a person's situation changes, or like if I'm having financial difficulties and now I'm feeling depressed because I can't pay my bills. Well, if my luck changes or something and I end up like winning the lottery or something, if you're feeling depressed, that means that whenever you win the lottery and you get your money, your situation changes, like that your mood changes. But with clinical depression, you win the lottery, but at the same time, like you're still feeling all of these things. Your mood still feels the same, even though now like your finances are paid off, your whatever it is that you were stressed about is like, now it's taken care of, but you're still feeling that way. That's clinical depression. And this is often why times like we will, what it also mentioned in the video, where it is also recommended where psychotherapy in addition to medication management, because for some people truly it might be able to need more than just therapy. They need that because it was, like it was saying in the video, where there's a lot of things going on in your brain that that medication piece will help you in kind of managing that as well. So this is oftentimes where we help people, like, okay, hey, if it's still not working out, like, look into medication management and see if they're open to taking medication for depression.
Hey, so I have a question regarding, so what would you say to like those in the crowd who are afraid of medicine? Because that happens quite a bit, like in across the board. So what would you say to those?
Yeah, I mean, one, if they are, I think they're like, it's either if they're afraid or they're not open to it. If they're afraid, it's because they don't really know much about it, about medication and how medication can help. So for the therapist, it is just a matter of like a little bit of psychoeducation with the client and explaining to them what medication and how medication can possibly help. What I usually do, because I only know a little bit about medication, it is not my focus, and I do not prescribe. So I usually recommend that they make an appointment with a psychiatrist to be able to really talk to them in depth about medication pertaining to depression or pertaining to whatever it is that they're going through. Because I think like we tend to be afraid or hesitant about things that we don't know. So if I'm like afraid of like taking this medication because I heard from TikTok that it can trigger this, or it can trigger bipolar, or it can trigger this, I'm afraid of that because of what I've just heard. Find a reputable source that you can get the information from. Not just any information, but like find a person that specializes in that, like a psychiatrist that can talk to you in depth about how the medication is working in your brain to be able to, and I think like once they do that and they know that, then they'll be like, oh, okay, got it, but at the same time, I think like another thing I would do too is just be able to maybe even consider or talk them through alternative methods, whatever that is, whatever that can look like. There's a lot of alternative medicines or things like that. If that is, if that's what they want to get into first before taking medication. So I've definitely worked with clients where for years, they would just like not do the medication. And then when they finally did it, they realized how effective and how helpful it was for them in a matter of minutes. And they're like, why was it taking me so long? But it was that initial fear, and just being able to work through with the client to be able to get over that fear of taking medication. But all in all, as therapists, we don't force people to take medication. If you don't want to take medication, look, we can only recommend. We don't force anyone to take medication. That's still ultimately your decision. But we can make all the recommendations and referrals.
For sure. So just to emphasize the point you said about seeing a psychiatrist, just so that the reason why Salah and says psychiatrist and I agree is because that's their specialty. Mm-hmm. That's what they went to school for, to see how a medication impacts your body. And so that's why we always recommend seeing a psych MD, a psychiatrist MD, because that's what they do, or a nurse psych who does medication as well. So we always recommend those two in therapy because we know that's what they went to school for, to specialize in, to see how the medication impacts literally your entire body. And they do a really good job about going into detail in it, as well as they just have a little bit, not a little bit, but they have a lot of research that they have to keep up with so that they know how it impacts you. So that's why we recommend a psychiatrist or a psych nurse.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Scarlett. All right. Any other comments or questions about this one? it's always an information heavy topic, depression and anxiety, which is why we tend to slow down more than usual in this conversation, because it's very, very informative. So please let us know if there's anything.
So somebody asked in the chat, what is postpartum depression? Good question.
Yeah, postpartum depression it's everything here that you see, but after you have baby. Does that make sense? So it's depression just after you have baby. And so of course, like the situation is a lot different, because then you're factoring in sleepless nights, you're factoring in maybe how mom feels about herself, her body, not only the trauma that her body had just endured, and then like everything else, all the worries, all the anxiety of being a new mom, and trying to get used to the dynamic of a new mom, things like that. So it's depression, everything that we just talked about, but it's just, after having baby. All right, we will keep it moving. Oh, also one more thing to add to depression. Now, when Scarlett and I do this depression and anxiety, please understand that under depression, there is a whole lot of other disorders that that falls under the mood umbrella. Same as anxiety when I go into anxiety. And so because there's so many and we can get into each and every one of them, we want to just focus on depression generally and anxiety in general, and not go into all of the different disorders that falls under the anxiety umbrella, because we would be here all night. And plus, they're all unique in their own way, and they all have different criterias that they're being measured to and things like that. So just for the sake of this conversation, we are sticking to just depression and anxiety. So just like with that question on what is it, postpartum depression. Yes, we can go into that too, and everything else that falls under the umbrella of depression. But just know that when we say depression, these are pretty much all of the common criterias that you will find throughout all of the different disorders under this umbrella. Same with anxiety when I go through anxiety. Okay. Good question. All right, we will keep it moving. Okay, clinical depression and what can this look like? So this is not an exhaustive list of what depression can look like. Just that depression in adults can look like feelings of worthlessness, or excessive guilt. So of course, like I mentioned this before, where this is just you're feeling guilty about things that like it's not even your fault, or it's things that is outside of your control, but you just can't help it. Like that sense of guilt excessively is there, and that feeling of worthlessness. It can also look like difficulty concentrating. Again, this was part of like what was in the previous slide. As far as the criteria, that focus piece, like it's just, you're not able to maintain or hold that focus. So you have a very, very difficult time concentrating. And then again, different recurrent thoughts of death or suicide, persistent sadness or low mood. So this is, again, across the board. Like we said, these are the different criterias that was in a previous slide, but in adults, this is what it can look like. And then for children, so this is a slightly different. So for kids, depression can look like irritability or anger. It can also look like they're just withdrawing from their social interactions. So maybe they were like, social butterflies before, but now they're not their social personalities anymore. Maybe they used to be like B students, A students, and now you're seeing their grades are just kind of deteriorating. Okay, so you're definitely noticing that change in their performances. They don't have a motivation to do their schoolwork. And then also, maybe you're noticing some self-harm or risky behaviors for them. So this could be your kids engaging in like self-injury or risky behaviors, like as a way to maybe try to cope with whatever emotional pain that they could be going through. So again, I think they're still all a bit similar, across the board, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what depression can look like for adults and then also for kids. But I'm curious, I want to put it out there, or maybe Scarlett, if you can also share maybe your experience as a therapist, if you work with clients that are clinically depressed and how they presented in therapy. Or if anyone want to share their experience as well, I want to give space for that.
For sure. I think one of the signs that I am particularly look for is when their grooming, how they groom themselves has
Ooh,
declined.
yeah.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is if, for example, if a male comes in and they're usually like clean shaven, and then I notice that if they have stopped doing that, or even stop brushing their hair, stop taking a shower, even stop brushing their teeth, those are things I was like, those are things that I in particularly pay attention to. In particularly with children, it's always the anger one. Because I think a lot of times when people think of anger, they don't think depression. They just think this kid is angry. But it's like, no, let's actually think about what's really going on, because, like Sala said, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some things, some important things that we have seen, in this field. And definitely, I think especially for kids in particular, especially for teens, when they start to withdraw, it's like, what happened? How did we, how did we get here? Because I even think in regards to the risky behaviors, some of the risky behaviors, like what we talked about last week, is running away.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people think they're running away because of their, I guess, being defiant, but that also can be a signifier of depression as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I think like just to drive that point across, that like, because a lot of the time when we do, and sometimes it can go for adults too, like anger,
Yeah.
so it can be that this is how they're displaying depression, but then we don't tend to think that way. We just see the behavior and then we judge the behavior. Or at least society judges the behavior, and it's like, oh, that's a troubled kid, when truly like this is how this kid is, sort of displaying depression. It looks different for everybody. So, for
I think
sure.
one of my an adult client I had years ago, they actually ran away, and so
Oh, wow.
they ran to a different state. That's how far they ran away, because of the symptoms that they were experiencing. So when I was able to explain to them what was going on, they're like, that's why, because I keep feeling like I'm running, because it's not just kids who do risky behaviors. Like I said, both of these things can go
Yeah.
for both,
Yes,
for all
I agree.
age groups. So it's just it's not only particular to a particular demographic.
Yeah. Yeah, I so agree. I agree. And then also one last point about clinical depression, how it can look and things. So just like the previous slide where we're talking about the criterias, all of these things too, like it has to be persistent for more than 2 weeks. And that's the key, right? Because if we didn't have sort of that stipulation there, for us as clinicians to go off of, then we would probably be saying everybody is depressed, because like, every time I get angry, it could be, it's like, oh, Sala's depressed. Like, no, I've been angry for like nearly every day for the past 3 weeks, so that could be an example. So just another thing to keep in mind, because like I said, experiencing all of these things too, like some of these things, not all of these things, can be like, in a way, like we tend to have these, thoughts. Sometimes we have a difficulty concentrating, and maybe it's because I didn't get enough sleep last night. I could be feeling worthless, if I feel like, I didn't do a good job or on something. But the thing is, those feelings of worthlessness or difficulty concentrating, they can easily go away. Maybe I'll feel that way for like a minute or so, but they tend to go away. But the thing is with clinical depression, like it has to be persistent. It has to be recurrent for at least more than 2 weeks. So that's always the key thing that we as therapists tend to look for as well. All right. Anything else that
Yeah, there was actually a question in the Facebook chat. I'm not sure if you guys covered this, but I don't think so. It was, what is postpartum depression?
We
Was the
did
question.
cover it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a quick question around this stuff. So when you see it like in your friends, I mean, do you recommend this kind of stuff? Like, hey man, I feel like you're depressed. Um, you know what I'm saying? What is like the proper protocol to like call that out in a friend, in a family member, that you might see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think back to that one video, right? The Samoan dude who was making fun of depression from his mom, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like from our cultural impact, that's why we kind of hide it, keep it secret,
Mm-hmm.
keep it to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think it just, it's such a delicate dance when we're talking about friends and family. So it's of course it's the simple questions like, hey, like, are you okay? Because I noticed like you're not, I haven't seen you, or just kind of calling it out in a general way. It's just like kind of noticed there's been a shift in you. Are you okay?
Mm.
Just something really light like that, because hey, because saying, hey, I feel like you're depressed, it's like, well, it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So I've always talk about, when I teach my clients and stuff, we always talk about how do you ask a question to where it's an invitation to the conversation. Because if somebody doesn't feel like they're invited to the conversation, the defenses go up really quickly. So it's like, how do
Mhm.
you ask the question so that they can tell you, because you can see it, but they have to be able to recognize it so that they can go seek help. So again,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, I know you kind of been off. Are you okay? Like, I just want to make sure you're okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what I would say to that.
Mhm. For sure. I would only add like like what Scarlett said too, like with that same template of like, hey, I noticed that, what, and then you can share whatever it is that you noticed that is changing in your friend. Or hey, I noticed that you've been like withdrawing a lot lately. You're not coming around a lot more, da da da. It's like I just want to let you know, because sometimes so you can notice and then you can sort of maybe ask the question. I think asking the open-ended questions are always helpful, because then
Mm.
you're not trying to like tell someone what to do, but like, hey, I noticed that whatever it is that you notice, you say that and say, well, just want to let you know that I'm here, and let me know, how can I support you?
That's helpful. And one
Because
other
then it,
observ
it kind of leaves it back to them. Then they
yeah.
don't feel like they're just like a case that you have to fix, or someone that you have to fix. It just kind of like, it lets them know that like someone else sees them, so now they feel seen, like, oh, someone sees that I'm not doing okay. And so when you point out what it is that you notice, it makes them feel like, oh, someone sees that I'm not doing okay. And then you're letting them know, hey, I'm here if you need anything. So now it's like, maybe even affirming for them that people care about them. So no matter what it is that's going on in their mind or their thoughts, but it's affirming for them, that someone is there. And then you're leaving it up to them and saying like, how can I, let me know if you need anything, or how can I support you? Let me know how I can support. So then it just kind of leaves it back to them to like, hey, whatever you want to do, like, I'm here.
No, that's helpful. I mean, because I mean, honestly, right, just from looking at the list you guys have here on your PowerPoint side, I mean, I feel like there's like different instances when a person
Mhm.
like if I take real inventory of like my feelings and thoughts, like, man, I feel like I've felt like this before for this amount of
Mhm.
time, but power through it.
Mhm.
We powered through it, but
Yeah.
Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. There's something to speak about powering through it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's just
That should be
how
a
we do.
class, Scarlett.
Don't worry, this is all coming.
Powering through.
Don't worry, Sal and I have
Our
a
next
bunch of
community
class ideas.
conversation: how to navigate through powering through
Powering
things.
through. And so I think that's the thing, but we power through so much that it becomes a detriment to our physical
Yeah.
health now.
Mm.
And so we're not addressing, because whatever goes on up here, because every time we think about just health, we only think about just the body, not even recognizing your brain is a part of your body. And
Mm.
so that's the thing. There's nothing ever wrong with powering through. It's just that if we do it so much to now we're having physical ailments, now we're breaking down, now we're having medical issues. That's where the challenge lies in. Because again, nothing wrong with it. It's just we can't keep doing that can't be our only go-to tactic.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I've got 8 toes left, so I can relate.
That's why we love you, Celie.
That's why we gonna be on you. All right, we are powering through this conversation. All right, we are powering through anxiety disorders. So, like I said before, excuse me. Like I said before, we want to focus on just anxiety in general. We're not doing a deep dive on all of the anxiety disorders that's listed in the DSM. We just want to talk about just anxiety in general. Now, what you see up here, these are all different criterias, or I guess you can say symptoms, that is often associated with anxiety in general. Now, all of the different anxiety disorders that's listed in the DSM, these are also included in there. Like some of these symptoms and criterias are also fall under all of those different anxiety disorders. But for the sake of tonight's conversation, we are only just focusing on just anxiety in general. What is anxiety? Anxiety, as you can see, is the anticipation of future events. So you're anticipating something happening, something that hasn't even happened yet, but you're preparing for it. You're worried about it. You're thinking about it. You are just anticipating it. And sometimes, like, here's what I want to get off first. So anxiety is absolutely normal. Like, let's just get that out there, because a lot of the times what I see mainly, like in the past year or so, is a lot of our young people coming into therapy because they feel anxious. Like, they feel anxious and they think that they have a mental health disorder. Okay, so anxiety is absolutely normal. However, it does get to a point where if you feel anxious long enough, right? If you feel anxious long enough, then it does get to a point where anxiety then becomes, like what we've said before, it does get to a point where the anxiety, if you be anxious long enough, it just gets to where it's clinically significant. It's causing you clinical significant distress in different areas of your life. So let me repeat that again. Anxiety is absolutely normal. Here's an example of normal, regular anxiety. I'm about to take a test. Leading up to the test, I'm feeling anxious about taking a test. Why? Because I don't want to fail the test. I want to make sure I pass the test, because maybe my job is dependent on passing this test. So I'm feeling anxious. I'm anticipating, all of the what ifs of whether or not I might pass this test or I might not pass this test. So I'm like feeling anxious about taking the test. This is normal, because this type of anxiety helps me to study. It helps me to prepare for the test, right? This is normal anxiety. However, it does get to a point where if I am so anxious to the point where when I'm about to go take the test and I decide, you know what, I'm so anxious, I'm going to keep avoiding this, and I'm just not going to go. I'm going to do this. And I keep doing that. It'll probably get to a point where I'm going to be too anxious to even sit down for a test, not just that test, but any test. So anxiety is normal. and very, very, it's like everybody has that. But it does get to a point where if you are anxious long enough, it does get to a point where it can cause clinical significant distress in your life, in different areas of your life. It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be just in social settings and things like that. Okay. So let's go through some of these different criterias or symptoms of that's often commonly found in different anxiety disorders. Restlessness or feeling keyed up, easily fatigued. And I know some of these are like, yeah, but we've seen some of that for depression. Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. Difficulty concentrating, or your mind is just going blank. See, we just talked about difficulty concentrating for depression. Irritability, muscle tension, sleep disturbance. Sometimes it's either you find it really, really difficult to fall asleep, or you sleep but at the same time, every time you wake up, like you don't feel like you are rested. So these are just some of the symptoms. So in order for the DSM, describes anxiety as, of course, like not only anticipation of future events, but it's excessive worrying. You have a lot of apprehensive expectations, even that, here's the key part, happens more days than not for at least 6 months. So for you to even get like a diagnosis of some kind of an anxiety disorder, you have to be experiencing these symptoms, or depending on the disorder, on the specific anxiety disorder, you have to be experiencing things for like maybe at least 6 months. And it could be about a number of events or activities, like at school or at work. Anxiety and worry are often associated with, more than 6 of these symptoms. And at least one of these symptoms has to be present for more days than not for the past 6 months. So if you're noticing how depression and anxiety, the key thing that you probably hear me say a lot is the time, the significance of the frequency of the time, right? So like I said, because some of these things, like you can experience it and it'll go away in like a day or two. And you're like, oh, I'm fine. But for therapists to be able to diagnose someone with anxiety disorders or depressive disorders, they have to be experiencing these criterias or these symptoms for a certain amount of time. Like we have to be able to see it. We have to be able to like when we're talking with clients, they have to be like, well, how long has this been going on? Like, okay, what did that look like in the past 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? What was happening? And so this is also a way where again, like we're able to kind of find out like exactly what type of anxiety disorder maybe someone is experiencing. And there's a whole bunch. There's so many under the anxiety disorder umbrella, and then a lot of mood disorders as well. But for the sake of tonight's conversation, we just want to give you the basics, a good foundation, understanding of what depression and anxiety is. So again, anxiety, very normal. Like we all experience anxiety. Anxiety is it's healthy. It's a way that we innately are able to move through and do things. But it does get to a point where anxiety can cause clinical significant distress in your life, and that's where we come in and we get to work with you on those things. Scarlett, did you want to add anything for anxiety?
Yes. I do. Before I do that, so someone in the chat has said, all of these I can relate to. I've been dealing with anxiety heavily since 2012. One point is that I have to sleep with the TV on, or unless I'm super tired. But sleeping without the TV on drives my mind crazy with all the overthinking, a lot of things, and it'll take me forever to fall asleep. Another person in the chat has said, interesting, 5 weeks, and with the question mark. Thanks for sharing that. I think in regards to anxiety is that And I would say like the reason why we say it's 5 weeks because it's causing significant daily impact, and so because sometimes, like Stella was saying, anxiety is a normal thing that we do experience, but if the reason why it gets to the 5 week point is because it's causing you to it's impacting your daily function so severely that you don't do, like I've had to work with I remember working with a high school student just to get him to walk to the door to introduce himself because he avoided all social contact, but he had to go to school because of course otherwise he would be truant. So it's stuff like that, like literally just like, and one of the things that I worked on with him is like just taking 3 steps to a door
Yeah.
because of all the
Mhm.
anxiety of all the overthinking that he had.
Yep.
And because there was just, it was just his thinking was what is it called, catastrophic thinking. Everything was a
Mhm.
catastrophe, like, oh my God, what if they do
Mhm.
this? So it's really helping them, so that's
Yes.
why it's the 5 week mark was what we would
Yeah.
say. And thank you for sharing your story about your anxiety since 2012. Yeah, we hold that for
Mhm.
sure because it's impactful because, for us to turn off our mind sometimes, especially somebody who's been diagnosed
Mhm.
with anxiety, it's a challenge. It's a
Mhm.
challenge for sure. So we hold that dearly. So thanks for sharing that.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing. I think maybe when I redo this class again, I'll add that one video. But there's this video I saw on social media where this guy is detailing how his whole life he thought he was like always on it, like like for example, he's like, whenever like we're on the plane with my wife, I'm always like, like I want to make sure I get our luggage down, and I want to make sure that I don't get up at this right time because somebody else might get up in the front. And then like, and he's like playing it all out in his head, right? He's like, okay, when the plane stops and we can take our seatbelts off, that's when I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna get the luggage, and then I'm gonna come down, bring the luggage down, and then I'll wait for this person, and then I'll grab my daughter first, and all going on through his mind, right?
A lot of anxiety.
Right, exactly. And so, and he was like, this whole time I thought I was on it. I'm like, oh man, I'm like, when we're on, like my wife should feel safe because I'm always on it. And then to realize, he said, and then I went to go see a therapist, and the therapist was like, yeah, I think you're anxious. You're just like, he's like, what? That was anxiety?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times we tend to operate like in that
Yeah.
hypervigilance mode, and we've
Yeah.
become so used to it that it feels like our norm, when
Mhm.
really it's like, like it's if you can't turn that off, right? Or if
Yeah.
you can't, like I said, like anxiety is normal, but if it's getting to the point where like you feel like it is impacting other areas of your life,
Mhm.
then you have a concern, right? But if you feel like, oh no, it's good, like it's I'm fine, nothing, nothing's the matter here. But like it's just kind of noticing like some of those small things. I have someone that's close to me too, where the more I went into my program and being a therapist, the more I realize this person that I've known for such a long time, and the more I look at their behavior, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're a very anxious person. And you start noticing that because like everything that they're doing, it's like when we go to a restaurant, make sure you sit over here, and let's just, don't touch just make sure you do your order right. You order first, make sure you sit here, and then I'll sit here. And this whole time in my mind, whenever I'd go with my friend, I'm like, oh man, how considerate is this friend of mine? But now knowing, after like going through, like I was like, actually that's anxiety. That's what that is. So it looks different for everyone, and if it, like I said, it's a normal, thing to have. Like it motivates us to do better. It motivates us to study. It motivates us to do those other things. But if you're in a relationship or something, and your anxiety is causing issues and concerns because you feel like you're being hyper vigilant, and your partner is like, what, calm down, and it's starting to cause issues in your life in different areas, then that's when you have to realize like, oh, okay, like there, it's an issue. Like how do I manage this? How do I cope with this? Okay. All right. We are moving along. Speaking of how anxiety is felt, I always like this short clip as well. It just goes through how this gentleman like experiences anxiety, and then he shares it through the spoken word. So let's have a listen.
Initially, I didn't know what to call it. But I remember when I first felt it, I hated the way it made me feel, but still I couldn't let people know that I held it. It weakened me, but I refused to let people see the weak in me. It felt like it was eating me from the inside out. And it made me want to tear the uneasiness from my insides out. My heartbeat, suited for house music, along with the heart pace, each thought race, no route to it. The nervousness, the worry, it sprouts too quick. The panic becomes organic, and I guess I just gotta plow through it. So I do my best to remain calm as the butterflies in my stomach result in sweaty palms. Friends keep asking me why I'm so quiet. I tell them I'm just tired and that nothing's wrong, while all along I just wanna go home and be alone. Because large crowds make me feel small and as though I'm in danger, and I desperately try to keep my eye on every single stranger. Meeting a bunch of new people brings so much pressure to my chest, and I don't talk a lot. I often watch and I let them do the rest. Sometimes I'm scared to succeed. I mean, what if I can't keep it up? Scared of how I'm perceived by the people who show me love. And when the news reports another senseless killing, I am soon engorged in an intense feeling. Thinking of the worst outcomes, I worry about my friends and family, constantly wondering if we'll all soon see a tragedy. I'm asking God to protect them and to look after me while I'm looking over my shoulder and around every corner to make sure no one is after me. And I know that's irrational, but sometimes I feel so nervous I don't even speak properly. I know what I want to say, but the message I try to convey comes out sloppy. See, it's the overthinking, the self-consciousness, the sleepless nights, the nauseousness, the feeling as though I can barely breathe. But I try not to be obvious. I feel terrified and paralyzed, and yet I force a smile through all of it. Self-diagnosis, I'm calling it. This is anxiety, and it resides in me so vibrantly, but I keep it inside of me, quietly, outwardly smiling. Inward emotions collide so violently, and if I can be a person who struggles with a moderate level of anxiety, imagine those who deal with it severely and how every day for them is a fight to breathe, a fight for peace, a fight to be okay.
My name is Brad, and I always battle with anxiety.
My name is Joseph, and anxiety tries to eat at my mind every day.
My name is Sheree, and I deal with anxiety on a daily basis.
My name is Amber, and I balance depression with anxiety.
My name is Chris, and I'm burdened with anxiety every day.
Such a good video.
I know, and every time I hear it, I just want to go snap, 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 snap. Yes. Yeah, it's such a good video of just like people kind of sharing their experiences of how they feel anxiety. And so, like I said, just want to reiterate that like anxiety is normal. It's a normal human, emotion, just like joy or fear or surprise. However, it does have a tendency to get to that point where if you are anxious long enough, more than likely you'll end up feeling depressed, and then more than likely it will cause significant distress in other areas of your life. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So why do people get depressed and anxious? It could be so many different reasons. This is not like the set reasons why people get depressed and anxious, but I just want to be able to address the this question of like sometimes like people are like, well, where's depression come from? Sometimes it's situational. So even feeling anxious can be situational. Sometimes, like when, again, like in that first video was talking about depression and what's happening like genetically, like it just means like it's, you have you're a lot more able to get it if it's in your genetics, right? So it can be genetics, but it can also be environmental. So different things can happen in your life every day. It could be a health concern, a health scare. It could be financial difficulties. It could be you're having relationship problems. It could be the stress of being a student and studying and being able to try to keep up with deadlines, things like that. It could be so many different reasons environmentally. So there's a lot of the internal reasons why people get depressed and anxious. And then there's also external reasons why. And some of these external reasons could also be what continues to exacerbate the symptoms of depression and anxiety, right? So for example, it could be like if you're going through financially difficult time, the longer you're in that financially difficult time and you're not able to pay your bills, the longer depressed you'll be, right? The longer you feel anxious and worried about where's your next meal going to come from? How are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to pay your rent? Things like that. So sometimes some of these external factors could be what continues to exacerbate the symptoms of a person feeling depression and anxiety. So again, want to reiterate, depression, absolutely, you can feel depressed. There's a difference between feeling depressed and being diagnosed with clinical depression. Very, very normal to feel anxious. However, anxiety does get to a point where it can become clinically significant and cause distress in different areas of your life. And then it can come out looking like the different disorders that falls under the anxiety umbrella. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. Is uncontrollable sweating another cause of anxiety? So I would say we kind of have to rule some things out before that can actually be determined. So it's best to speak with your primary care doctor about that in regards to that, because we can't just say it's because of anxiety, because we don't know the other parts that may be happening within your body as well.
Yeah.
So that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, I absolutely. So I would say make sure that you speak to your provider and that it's not an actual medical condition. But I can see uncontrollable sweating or just sweating profusely as like a symptom of anxiety. Because like I said, it can look different for everybody. And so, because remember, when you're feeling anxious, you're worried, you're nervous, you're all of that, right? And that can cause your heart rate to go up. And then this is where it can expel some of the moisture, in your body. So it can be a symptom of, if you're in a highly stressful environment, you're in an environment where you feel super anxious about something. So I can see, sweating profusely as a symptom of anxiety. But if it's like something to where it's like super excessive and uncontrollable, like you said, even with you try some things and still not working, I say just rule out that it's not a medical thing, because it can be like what Scarlett said, it can be something medical that is a lot more than what we think it is. Okay. All right. So here are some ways to be able to manage anxiety and depression. So these are actually tools that, or interventions is what we'd call it, that we would actually share with our clients. We would, for example, for anxiety, we share with them on how to challenge their thoughts. Because I think Scarlett mentioned it, one of the irrational ways of thinking about things is catastrophizing. This is when everything is a disaster. Everything is going to be the end of the world situation. That's what catastrophizing is. And that could be like all you're thinking about. Doesn't matter what you do, it's going to be the worst case scenario that's happening. So one of the ways that we help people, sift through that is we teach them how to challenge those irrational thoughts. Another way that's really common that we do too is we do progressive muscle relaxation. That's one of my favorites, where you're just kind of tensing up different, muscle groups in your body, because with your arms, your feet, your calves, your back, like this area. And we just walk clients through being able to tense up different parts of their body so they can know what that feels like, and then be able to like slowly release it so that they can know what that feeling of relief feels like as well. And it helps to release some of the tension that they're experiencing. Grounding techniques, and I think maybe later on if we have time, we'll go through that. And then with depression, these are some of the things that we usually walk clients through, or we help them to learn in therapy as well. Where just like being able to talk to them about, even though you don't feel like going for a walk, go for a walk. This is what we would call behavioral activation. Even though you don't feel like going out with your friends and you've been avoiding them for like more than 2 weeks now because you're feeling depressed and things like that, like just go out with them anyways. Like just do it anyways. And this is just to activate that behavior part, because you'll notice that when you do go out, it does change your mood a bit. So we help clients through that as well. Different mindfulness exercises. And then also just making sure that you're leaning into your social support system, whoever those people are. Make sure you're in contact with them. Like the thing is about depression is you don't want to isolate yourself. That's what you don't want to do. Like, just don't isolate yourself. Don't, just keep everyone out and just be like, okay, I'm just going through something, so I'm just going to be by myself. Like, that's probably one of the worst things that you can probably do, because then you are just bombarded and overwhelmed with all of your catastrophizing thoughts, all of the negative ways that you're thinking about things. You're not going out, you're not seeing, so you're just immersed in it. And that's not a helpful way to be able to come out of depression. Okay, Scarlett, did you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, just to kind of emphasize, why Sala was saying the behavioral activation part, because there is research and studies that prove that we won't get into like how the impact of like the internally, but research and study has when you move and do something, it does boost your mood. It does change your mood. And so that's why we're emphasizing the importance of not isolating and doing an activity, reaching out to your social support, again, your emotionally safe people, and really, because even when we're talking about to managing anxiety, is like, because all of that, what you're talking about is how we center ourselves. How can we continue to center? So that's just the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah. And this is just a quick snapshot to let you know, like, these are some of the things you could possibly be learning in depth in therapy. These are like the different tools that we teach our clients, and we help them to practice every single time that they, they feel this way, and we walk them through it. So again, it just kind of shows you like the importance of being able to go to therapy, because then you'll also have your therapist there that is able to help keep you accountable in all of these different things, and then help to make sure that you are doing all of these things. So we have a lot of tools that we help our clients through anxiety and depression. These are just some of them. Okay. All right. So then how do we navigate through these cultural stigmas around depression and anxiety? And we already know that there are already cultural stigmas just to go to therapy, period. And so, some of those ways are like kind of similar stigmas around when someone is feeling depressed. It's like being portrayed as being lazy, or, they don't want to do anything. But when truly it's like, no, they're depressed. Well, we can start with, being open to talk about it. This is why we keep having these conversations, so we can just keep talking about it. And Scarlett and I will be here, and we're gonna be the ones that's like, look, let's have the conversation about these things. Let's have the conversation, because the more that we do talk about it, the more we can continue to normalize depression and anxiety and seeking help for mental health services for our communities. Like, I keep going back to that one research finding that says that our communities like underutilize these services. We don't seek it out, of course, because it's like, it's not really an avenue of help that we tend to turn to. But we want to change that, because there's a lot of people in our community that are suffering with depression and anxiety, different anxiety disorders. And they probably don't know where to go to. And two, like, they don't really, want to talk about it, or they don't, there's so much stigma around it. So we want to keep talking about it. Let's keep talking, share it with somebody, and just keep normalizing, depression, anxiety, as far as like, mental health disorders and things like that, because we want to keep bringing these topics to the forefront. So that way, like, people that are going through these things can be like, oh, okay, like, I feel safe being able to come out and say, as a Samoan person, like, I've been battling depression for X amount of years, now what? And then we're able to guide them to the correct resource. So be open to talk and dialogue about depression and anxiety. And then two, we just want to say, again, and I mentioned this before, refrain from self-isolation. Like, naturally in our communities, in our culture, we are collectivistic in nature. So hopefully, we can sort of tap into that part of who we are, and just lean into your community, lean into your trusted people. Scarlett always says, like, find your emotionally safe people to talk to. And I agree. Make sure that, you're not just you're in a vulnerable state when you're going through these things. You're in such a vulnerable state. So the last thing you want to do is be able to, talk to someone that maybe is going to dismiss you or minimize what you're going through, or not even address or acknowledge what you're going through. So make sure that you're leaning into people that you trust for support. And with everything, refrain from isolating yourself when you're going through these things. As difficult as it is, please reach out and connect with your community. And then keep in mind that depression and anxiety does not discriminate. That means it don't matter if you Samoan, it don't matter if you Tongan, it don't matter if you Fijian, like, don't matter if you're white. We used to think that, like, another stigma is that therapy is just for white people. No, it's not. Because depression don't say, oh, they Samoan, like, I'm gonna go ahead and not go to that one. Like, no, you Samoan, you get depressed, you get anxious. Like, it's not it does not discriminate. So keep that in mind, and know that, like, if you're going through it, just know that, like, someone else is, of your same ethnicity is possibly going through it as well. And it's not just you. And also why we want to just keep having these conversations. So that way we can, as we're sharing our stories and everyone is sharing their stories and their own experiences, it really does, it might help someone else that's tuning in and be like, oh, okay, like, that person is Samoan, like, they've also experienced depression and anxiety. So, I guess Samoans do experience depression and anxiety, So, yeah, just some things to keep in mind. We always want to keep it, short, sweet, to the point. So these are just some key points on how we can navigate some of those cultural stigmas around depression and anxiety. Oh, sorry, Scarlett, did you want to add anything to that other one?
Yeah, just real quickly regarding self-isolation, refrain from it. So I think a lot of times people think self-isolation is just like being in a space by yourself physically. But part of what I also talk about with my clients about self-isolation also is not talking about what's going on with you. So again, that whole message we've talked about before is the suffering in silence. That is a form of self-isolation. Like, you're coming in, showing that you're, physically you're like laughing and smiling, but like, behind all of that, you're literally self-isolating by not talking about what's going on. So again, continue to emphasize why it's important to find that emotionally safe person or a resource that can help you through whatever you're experiencing, so you don't self-isolate.
That's really good. That's a really good point. Because we do see that a lot. Like, and I mean, who here has, like, seen or heard stories of, like, people that, like, out of nowhere, like, next thing you know, they passed on or they've completed suicide, and they're like, this person has been depressed for X amount of years, but you could never tell because they were functioning. they were functioning, they were happy, they were this, they were that. I think about, and I think I remember sharing it in the same class too. Like, I think about, I forgot his name, but he used to be on the Ellen Show. You know, he's the DJ on the Ellen Show. And, you know, oh my gosh, now his name is going to be stuck with me. Celia, if you remember his name, let me know.
Twitch.
Yes, Twitch. There you go. And I mean, like, he's always doing dance videos with his wife, and he's always got this like personality. Like, he's always on, like he's always happy. That's just how his personality was, even on the Ellen Show and things like that. And so next thing you know, there was that one year where, you know, he completed suicide. And I think everyone was just kind of shocked, because this was someone that always had that his mood was always up. Like there was no, like, he was the DJ on there. Like, his mood was always up, and he was always like, you know, seemed like he was motivated. He's just like doing things. He's always smiling in his family videos, always laughing with his kids and his wife. But then he completed suicide. And so I think everyone was just kind of shocked and taken back, because, you know, they never saw the sign. I think even the wife was sharing that, like, there was no signs that she could see. You know, and I think that goes into what Scarlett was saying, that self-isolation, where you could be functioning and doing everything, but then you're isolating yourself by not being truthful and not being forthcoming and not sharing exactly what it is that you're going through with anyone. So you're just keeping all of those things locked up, and, you know, things happen. So that's a really good point. All right, so again, I think this is just sort of a breakdown of the things that I talked about like 2 slides before, with the deep breathing. Again, these are like the different ways that we help our clients in coping with anxiety and depression. These are some tools that we teach them, and we keep teaching them, and they keep practicing, so that whenever they do feel anxious, they can calm themselves down, they can ground themselves in the moment. And this is like the breakdown of that progressive muscle relaxation I was talking about. And then when they're starting to feel depressed, remember, when you're feeling depressed, we all feel depressed sometimes, but the difference between feeling depressed and clinical depression is that amount of time, right? So if you're feeling depressed, and you don't want it to get, you know, to the point where it just becomes clinical depression, you know, consider some 3 good things. And this is just a way that, like, it helps to kind of change that negative way that you're thinking about things, and to be able to reframe some of the ways that you're thinking about things. So again, we go into detail in being able to work with our clients and ensuring that they know how to use these different skills when it comes to them experiencing depression and anxiety. Scarlett, did you want to add anything to this? Good. All right. Oh, and that's what we got for tonight. That is depression and anxiety. Please, if you still have questions or comments, feel free to put it in the chat. Let us know. Like I said, I think this conversation is a pretty informative one, but we still welcome all the questions and comments.
Yeah, one thing I would add, even if you go home, and you're like, you now have a question you want to ask, or please don't hesitate to reach out to Sala and I. That's why we always provide our information, because we want to be to assist our community just by answering these questions. And so, you know, we just want to thank you all for attending. And again, we're gonna continue to expand these conversations, because they are important for our community, and we want to continue to see the narrative change in the community about mental health. So, Celie, floor is yours, my sir.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. It's actually a lot to think about there. I was taking self-inventory and asking myself, how honest are you being with yourself? It actually, for my Bible listeners out there, reminds me of John chapter 6, verse 60, I think. I used to be a Bible guy. But that's when the disciples told Jesus, this is a hard teaching, who can accept it, right? When he was talking about the Son of Man ascending. But I feel like that's what this conversation is, right? So if we're honest with ourselves, which I don't know, that was tough. That was tough to listen to. But if we're honest with ourselves, right, we've got some two amazing Pacific Islander therapists who we can lean into. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Next week, we're going to talk about boundaries. It's an exciting class. I have a t-shirt for that class. So I'm excited to bust it out again. But yeah, thank you, everyone. You enjoy your night, and we will see you soon. Oh, for last thing, as I put 2 survey documents in both Facebook and on this Zoom chat. If you can fill that out, it really helps us, talk about our stats, how this is improving our Pacific Islander and Asian and Pacific Islander community health outcomes. It's super helpful. But thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.